This is Dr. Richard Zimmer. Let's give him a hand after I did that. And he is going to talk about some of the mental health issues in dealing with this fire. And so, Dr. Zimmer, I apologize, and here you go. Thank you, sir.
Okay, first, I'd like to welcome you all here, and I mean that sincerely. We're all alive. I think that's the most important single thing that we have to understand about this. We've survived all of this stuff. I want to make one digression for a second, which is to thank my wife for helping me prepare our talk here on this, and so I want to acknowledge her. She is also an MFT. Her name is Ann Zimmer, and she's sitting in the back. I will say a few things, and please then ask me questions about the stuff. First of all, we're all in this. We've all experienced shock, and I think that is really important. It's not just simply loss. We'll talk about the loss in a little bit, but we've all experienced shock. And that kind of shock is equivalent to a lot of the shock that people have in a war zone or another kind of nightmare zone in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And we should understand that because we've experienced this kind of shock, it's not going to go away easily. I think the mayor at the start said this very eloquently, and so, excuse me, I would like to add to it. It will go away, but we don't know when, and it will abate, and we don't know when. And so what you have to do, what we have to do, and I include myself in everything that I'm saying to you, is to take care of yourself and to take care of all of your loved ones, and to pay attention to the kinds of changes that are going on with you, whether you lost your home or not, whether you know people you know died in this whole process or got injured in this whole process. The most important single thing is to watch what you're going through and look for the kinds of symptoms that show some kind of stress reaction. So let me add to what the doctor so eloquently said, which is that one of the things that you may be experiencing is a whole bunch of reactions. For example, because of the loss and because of the grieving, you may be experiencing depression. That is particularly unhelpful for people who are already depressed. I'm not being cute about this here, but there are people with psychiatric conditions who are on medications for depression, whether it's pre-existing or bipolarity or any kind of other kind of depression that they might be having. So that the depression that you might be experiencing is going to intensify if you are already have an existing depression inside your situation. The second thing that you're going to experience is a stress reaction. And I'm not a physician, and hopefully I'm not walking on too much thin ice, and please correct me, doctor, if I am. But I would worry about all sorts of physiological reactions in terms of stress reactions, including sleeplessness. On the opposite side of that is sleeping too much. You can do both ways. What happened, I was talking to, I teach some classes through the older adults program at the junior college, and all the people at the various senior centers who were lucky, and I put that word deliberately in there, got moved to other locations out of the area. And one of the women in the class in one of the locations said she came back recently to her place here, and she's been sleeping a long, long time. In other words, every day she's been sleeping. So you can wind up being sleepless, you can wind up having a lot of sleep, you can wind up not eating, you can wind up overeating. You can wind up getting rashes, you could wind up ultimately, if your body doesn't have the kind of right resiliency, stamina, and the right kind of vaccinations on this, you could wind up getting shingles. You could wind up getting all sorts of herpes if that's the way your body chooses to react. In other words, there are stress reactions that you can have, and I want to say this in terms of other people. There are other stress reactions that your loved ones can have, including your children, your grandchildren, your grandparents, your relatives, and although you can't see it so easily on them, on your pets. One of the things that's really important in terms of what happens in a crisis like this is that the pets get affected just as much as anything else. And one of the things we learned out of the disaster in Katrina was that people got all screwed up and stayed in their houses and died for no reason except because they didn't want to abandon their pets. So one of the things you have to do is watch your pets in terms of the reactions that they have. So what can you do about all of this stuff? The first thing is to always monitor yourself and understand that you're going to be screwing up for a while. In other words, you're not going to make the best kinds of decisions. And all of the speakers who spoke so far and the ones who are going to follow me are people who have had extensive experience dealing with disasters like this. And I want to use this word both deliberately as a fact and as well as a psychological state, the nightmares that we've gone through and we continue to go through. It is a nightmare, and some of you may be experiencing nightmares. What you want to do is watch out for other people to see how they're doing. And the people who are experts here, who have dealt with all of these things, know more about this, and they can help you deal with the kinds of things that you need to do, because I want to say this real clear, you're not on top of everything. And I was sitting in the doctor's lounge over at Memorial Hospital, and one of the things that one of the physicians was saying to me, he said, you know, I'm in my late 60s, I don't have it ability anymore to compartmentalize. Some of us don't anymore. We're older. It depends on our past, our psychological past, and our medical past. We don't have the ability to compartmentalize. So that means you have to know your limits. Don't think that you can do everything. It's really important to remember that and ask for help, whether it's a specialist's help, other families' help, getting hugs from people, going to your psychologist or therapist. Ask for help. Your children and your grandchildren are eligible for all sorts of services through the schools. County Mental Health is working in this area. All of the hospitals have psychologists and other kinds of therapists attached to them. I want to say something that's a non-trivial point in terms of insurance about this, because it's another way that many insurance companies play games about this. Excuse me. And that is that they don't provide translators unless you push them. And if you can't speak English, or somebody in the family needs English, whether it's for a physician or a therapist, they are legally obligated to provide translators, whether it's in your office or on the phone, but you get those insurance companies to provide translators for you. A couple of last things. Don't have any survivor's guilt. I've heard a couple of people say this about themselves and say, well, why did I survive? Don't ask. It's not worth it. It doesn't help you. It's not the kind of thing which the Swedish Stockholm. I will tell you a semi-funny story about this to make a point about this, but the fire was very random, and there's no logic to the fire. Yesterday, my wife and I went to have lunch up near where the Kmart burned down, up at Carl's, and we pulled into the parking lot. You may have read this in the newspaper. We pulled into the parking lot there, and there's a fire engine there. And we went up to the front door, and he said, we're closed. I said, why are you closed? He said, because we had a fire. And I said, really? I said, are you going to tell the newspaper about this one? But they, so they gave us some hamburgers and sent us away. The irony of this is too much. They survived the fires only to have a grease fire in their facility. So you have to look on the irony of all of this and the dark humor in all of this stuff. And so let me wind up with what I'm saying here, which is that you always have to do several things that are good for yourself every day. If you're not significantly obese, and the doctor can correct me on this, and it's okay for you to do this, chocolate is always indicated. Huh? Dark chocolate. But always do something good for yourself. Hug each other, tell each other that you love each other, ask how each other's doing, bring humor into your life. And so now I will stop and answer questions, and if we run out of time, you have my contact information in the brochures that are handed out. So let me see if there's any questions that you all have. No? Is it perfect? No. Yes, thank you. You have a question?
I lost everything in the Valley Fire,
Yes.
and then I was evacuated in this one,
Yes.
and it started like triggering the old stuff. I didn't lose my house or my office in this one, but just that terror. This time I saw the fire coming towards us as we were stuck in traffic, and every exit I tried to get off was fire, and it just feels like it's taking me back 2 years after all the work I've done.
Yes, and thank you for raising that, because it was something that I wanted to touch on, which is if you've had any kind of a tragedy, including a fire or any other kind of disaster, an earthquake, it will bring it back. That will be what will happen. And what you should do, I always have to be cautious about this. I'm not looking for the business. Go to see your local psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, and have her or him work with you. In other words, you need to go back and have, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, you need to go through this and desensitize yourself from this. And I want to say this is really important, because many of you have served in the military or in equivalent positions like police and fire, and are now no longer in this. This will trigger you. I want to say this in terms of the not a political issue, so you understand this, because it's something with which I have experience that's different from other kinds of experience in terms of servicing the military. The VA in this area works incredibly well. And when they do not have the people who are doing psychotherapy in it, they farm it out. Through Tri-West, Tri-Care, there are a number of us who are vendorized to see veterans on this stuff, who are trained to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that, and to work with the families. And for those of you who are in active military, some of us are vendorized to deal with military one-stop on this as well. In other words, the resources are there for you to take advantage of. Do not think that you should do this all on your own, and you should look to those people in your lives who are first responders. And I want to include in that, so you understand, I'm using my twisted terminology to keep you amused and well as focused on this. There's first responders and 1.5 responders. And what I mean by that is there's the support people for the first responders who are disaster trained, but you don't think of them. Those are the people in the counties and the schools who are doing the health stuff. They're not the doctors, they're not the nurses, they're not the police, they're not the fire people, but they're your neighbors, and they're your family, and they need to be helped too through all of this stuff. So one of the things I've been astounded by on this, and maybe somebody else can comment on this, this area has, to me, shown itself to be an incredibly wonderful, resourceful community where we're all taking care of each other. We should be proud of that and really think it's something that we should continue. And so without getting into any psychobabble on about, we all love each other, and this should be a turning point in our personal lives with each other. So any other comments or questions? Because I want to leave as much time for the other people. So please contact me if you have any questions. You got my phone number inside the brochure, and thank you.
Dr. Richard Zimmer, thank you very much.